Hey everyone. Welcome back to Story Time. And I am your host, Ruby. The story that we're currently reading is The Darkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken. And today we're going to be reading chapter 6. So make sure you grab your snacks and your drink. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, I'd greatly appreciate it if you do. And give this video a like. And now, get comfy and let's begin chapter 6. It was still cold and dark out when I opened my eyes. AC blew through the vents, batting at the little yellow cardboard tree hanging down from the rearview mirror. Its vanilla fragrance was sickeningly sweet and so overwhelming that it turned my empty stomach. Mick Jagger crooned next to my ear, singing about war and peace and shelter, those kinds of lies. I tried to turn my face away from whatever the song was escaping from, but I only managed to smack my nose against the window and strain my neck. I sat straight up and almost hanged myself on the gray seatbelt. We weren't in the Jeep anymore. The night came back with a deep breath, complete and overwhelming all at once. The glow of the green dashboard lit the scrubs I wore, and that was enough to flood my mind with reality of what had happened. Smears of trees and undergrowth lined a road that was completely dark, save for the car's weak yellow headlights. For the first time in years, I could see the stars. That Thurman's monstrous lights had faded into non-existence. They were so bright, so clear, that they couldn't have been real. I didn't know what was more shocking: the endless stretch of road or the sky. Tears pricked at the back of my eyes. "Don't forget to breathe, Ruby," came the voice beside me. I pulled the surgical mask down from over my mouth as I looked over. Dr. Begbie's blonde hair was around her face, sweeping against her shoulders. In the time it had taken us to get from Thurman to wherever we were, she had stripped off her scrubs and changed into a black t-shirt and jeans. The night stained the skin under her eyes like bruises. I hadn't noticed the sharp angles that made up her nose and chin. "You haven't been in a car for some time, huh?" she laughed. But she was right. I was more aware of the forward lurch of the car than I was of my own heartbeat. "Dr. Begbie—" "Call me Kate," she interrupted, a bit harsher than before. I don't know if I reacted to the abrupt change of tone or not, but she immediately followed with, "I'm sorry. It's been a very long night, and I could use a cup of coffee." According to the dashboard, it was 4:30 a.m. I had only been asleep for 2 hours, but it felt more alert than I had all day, all week, all my life. Kate waited until the Rolling Stones had finished out their song before turning down the radio. All they play are oldies now. I thought it was a joke at first, or something Washington wanted, but apparently that's all that gets requested these days. She snuck a look at me out of the corner of her eye. I can't imagine why. Dr. Kate, I said. Even my voice was stronger. Where are we? What's going on? Before she could answer, there was a cough from the back seat. I twisted around despite the pain in my neck and chest. Curled up there in a protective little ball was another kid, about my age or maybe a year younger. That other kid, Max? Matthew? Whatever, from the infirmary. And he was looking far better than I felt as he slept on. We just left Harvey, West Virginia, Kate said. That's where we met with some friends that helped me switch cars and remove Martin back there from the medical trunk. We had to smuggle him out. Wait. Oh, don't worry, Kate quickly said. We made sure it had air holes. Like, that was my biggest concern? They just let you take it out to the car? I asked, without even checking it. She glanced at me again, and I was proud of the look of surprise there. The doctors at Thurman used those trunks to transport medical waste. The camp controllers started forcing the doctors to dump the waste themselves when the budget got cut. Sarah and I had duty for this week. Sarah? I interrupted. Dr. Rogers? She hesitated a split second before nodding. Why did you tie her up? Why are you helping us? She answered my question with one of her own. Have you ever heard of the Children's League? Bits and pieces, I said, and only in whispers. If the rumors were true, they were an anti-government group. They were the ones the younger kids, the later arrivals to Thurman, claimed were trying to take down the camp system. The ones that supposedly hid kids so they couldn't be taken. I always assumed they were our generation's version of a fairy tale. Nothing that good could ever be true. We, Kate said, letting that word sink in before continuing, are an organization dedicated to helping children affected by the government's new laws. John Alvin, have you heard of him? He was formerly an intelligence advisor to Gray. He started the Children's League? She nodded. After his daughter died, and he realized what was going to happen to the kids who survived, he left D.C. and tried to expose all of the testing that was happening at the camps. The New York Times, the Post, you name it. None of them would run the story because by then, things were bad enough that Gray had them under his thumb for national security reasons, and the smaller papers folded along with the economy. So I was trying to wrap my mind around this, wondering if I had misheard her. So he created the Children's League to help us. Kate's face lit up in a smile. Yes, that's exactly right. Then why did you help only me? The question sprung up like a lone weed, ugly and deeply rooted. I rubbed a hand over my face, trying to clear the rumblings in my brain, but I couldn't tear it out. There was a strange feeling rising in my chest that followed, like something heavy was trying to work its way up from my center. It might have been a scream. What about the others? I didn't recognize my own voice. Others? You mean the other children? Kate's eyes were focused only on the road in front of us. They can wait. Their situation wasn't as pressing as yours was. When the time is right, I'm sure we'll go back for them. But in the meantime, don't worry, they'll live. I recoiled almost instantly at her tone, more than her words. The way she said, they'll live, was so dismissive. I half expected to see a hand come up into the air to wave me off. Don't worry. Don't worry at the way they've been mistreated. Don't worry about their punishments. Don't worry about the guns constantly trained on their back. God, I wanted to throw up. I had left them behind, all of them. I had left Sam, even after I promised we'd get out together. After everything she had done to protect me, I just left her there. Oh, no. Ruby, I'm sorry. I didn't even realize how that would sound, she said, turning back and forth between me and the road. I just meant, I don't even know what I'm saying. I was there for weeks and still can't begin to imagine what it must have been like. I shouldn't act like I know what you went through. I just left him, I told her. And it didn't matter that my voice was breaking or that my hands had become clutching to my elbows to keep from grabbing her. Why did you only take me? Why couldn't you save the others? Why? I told you before, she said softly. It had to be you. They would have killed you otherwise. The others aren't in danger. They're always in danger, I said, and wondered if she had stepped a single foot beyond the infirmary. How could she not have seen? How could she not have heard it, felt it, breathed it in? The air at Thurman was so coated in fear, you could taste it like vomit at the back of your throat. It hadn't taken me less than a day in that place to see that hatred and terror came in circles and that they fed off of each other. The PSFs hated us, so they had to make us fear them, and we feared them, which only made us hate them even more. There was an unspoken understanding that we were at Thurman because of each other. Without the PSFs there would be no camp. But without the PSI freaks, there would be no need for PSFs. So whose fault was it? Everyone's? No one's? Ours? You should have just left me. You should have taken someone else. Someone who was better. They'll be punished because of this. I know it. They'll hurt them. And it's my fault for going. For leaving them behind. I knew I wasn't making sense. But I couldn't seem to connect my thoughts to my tongue. That feeling, that heart-swallowing guilt, the sadness that took hold and never let itself be shaken free. How did you tell someone that? How did you put it into words? Kate's lips parted, but no sound came out for several moments. She took a firm hold of the wheel and guided the car over to the side of the road. Her foot came off the gas, and she allowed the car to roll in a hesitant stop. When the wheels finally ceased spinning, I reached for the door handle, a spike of total and complete grief cutting me. "What are you doing?" Kate asked. She had pulled over because she wanted me to get out. Hadn't she? I would have done the same thing if our situations had been flipped. I understood. I leaned back away from her arm as she stretched over, but instead of pushing the door open, she slammed it shut and let her fingers linger over my shoulder. I cringed, pressing back against the seat as hard as I could, trying to avoid her touch. This was the worst I had felt in years. My head was humming, a sure sign I was dangerously close to losing control of it. If she had any thoughts about hugging me or stroking my arm or anything my mom would have done, my reaction was more than enough to convince her not to try. "Listen to me very carefully," she said, and it didn't seem to matter to her that at any moment a car or a PSF could come charging up the road. She waited until I was looking her in the eye. "The most important thing you ever did was learn how to survive. Do not let anyone make you feel like you shouldn't have, like you deserve to be in that camp. You are important and you matter. You matter to me, you matter to the league, and you matter to the future." Her voice caught. "I will never hurt you or yell at you or let you go hungry. I will protect you for the rest of my life. I will never fully understand what you've been through, but I will always listen when you need to get something out. Do you understand?" Something warm bloomed in my chest, even as my breathing hitched in my throat. I wanted to say something to that, to thank her, to ask her to repeat it again, just to be sure I hadn't misunderstood or misheard her. I can't pretend like it never happened, I told her. I still felt the vibrations of the fence under my skin. You shouldn't. You should never forget. But part of surviving is being able to move on. There's this word, she continued, turning to study her fingers gripping the wheel. Nothing like it exists in the English language. It's Portuguese. Saudade. Do you know that one? I shook my head. I didn't know half of the words in my own language. It's more. There's no perfect definition. It's more of an expression of feeling, of terrible sadness. It's the feeling you get when you realize something you once lost is lost forever, and you can never get it back again. Kate took a deep breath. I thought of that word often at Thurman, because the lives you had before, that we all had before, we can never get them back. But there's a beginning and an end, you know? It's true that you can't reclaim what you had, but you can lock it up behind you. Start fresh. I did understand what she was saying, and I understood that her words were coming from a true, caring place. But after having my life broken down into rotations for so long, the thought of dividing it up even further was unimaginable. Here, she said, reaching inside the collar of her shirt. She pulled a long silver chain over her head, and the last thing to reveal itself was the black circular pendant, a little bigger than the size of a thumb, hanging from it. I held out my hand and she dropped the necklace into it. The chain was still warm from where it had been kept against her skin, but I was surprised to find the pendant wasn't anything more than plastic. We call that a panic button, she said. If you squeeze it for 20 seconds, it activates and any agents nearby will respond. I don't imagine you'll ever use it or have the need to use it, but I'd like you to keep it. If you ever feel scared, or if we get separated, I want you to press it. It'll track me? Something about the idea made me vaguely uncomfortable, but I slipped on the chain anyway. Not unless you activate it, Kate promised. We designed them that way so that the PSFs wouldn't be able to accidentally pick up on the signal being transmitted from them. I promise. You're in control here, Ruby. I plucked the pendant up and held it between my thumb and index finger. When I realized how dirty my fingers were, and how much dirt was still packed under my nails, I dropped it. Me and nice things didn't go well together. Can I ask you another question? I waited until she had finally nudged the car back on the road. And even then, it had taken me a few tries to get the words out. If the Children's League was formed to end the camps, why did you even bother getting me and Martin? Why didn't you just blow up the control tower while you were there? Kate ran a hand over her lips. I'm not interested in those kinds of operations. She said, I'd much rather be focused on the real issue, which is helping you kids. You can destroy a factory, and they'll just build another one. But once you destroy a life, that's it. You never get that person back. Do people have any idea? I squeezed out. Do the people know that they're not reforming us at all? I'm not sure, Kate said. Some will always live in denial about the camps, and they'll believe what they want to believe about them. I think most people know there's something off, but they're in too deep with their own problems to call into questions how the government is handling things at the camp. I think they want to trust that you're all being treated well. Honestly, there are so few of you now. I sat straight up again. What? This time, Kate couldn't look at me. I didn't want to have to be the one to tell you this, but things are much worse now than they were before. The last estimate the League put together said that 2% of the country's population of 10 to 17-year-olds were in reform camps. What about the rest? I said, but I already knew the answer. The 19%? Most of them fell victim to Ian. They died? I corrected. All the kids everywhere? No, not everywhere. There have been a few cases of it reported in other countries. But here in America, Kate took a deep breath. I don't know how much to tell you now, because I don't want to overwhelm you, but it seems like the onset of Ian or PSI powers is linked to puberty. How many? They really hadn't learned anything new in all the years I was trapped in Thurman. How many of us are left? According to the government, there are approximately 250,000 children under the age of 18, but our estimate is closer to 1/10 of that. I was going to be sick. I unbuckled my seatbelt and leaned forward, putting my head between my legs. Out of the corner of my eye, sorry about that, I saw Kate's hand come down as if she was going to rest it on my back, but I twisted away again. For a long time, the only sound between us was the tire turning against the old road. I kept my face down and eyes shut long enough for Kate to worry. Are you feeling queasy? We had to give you a high enough dosage of penicillin to induce seizure-like symptoms. Trust me, if we could have done it any other way, we would have. But we needed something serious enough for the PSFs to actually bring you back to the infirmary. Martin snored behind us until eventually even that faded into the sound of the tires rolling down the old road. My stomach twisted at the thought of asking exactly how many miles we were from Thurman, how far a way the past really was. I know, I said after a while. Thank you. I mean it. Kate reached over, and before I could think to stop her, her hand ran a smooth path from my shoulder down my arm. I felt something warm tickle the back of my mind and recognized its warning trill. The first white-hot flash from her mind came and went so fast. I saw the scene like a photo negative. A young girl with white blonde hair in a high chair, her mouth frozen in a toothless grin. The next image lingered long enough for me to recognize I was seeing fire. Fire everywhere, climbing the walls of the room, burning with all the intensity of the sun. This memory? I trembled, shuddered hard enough that I had to clench my teeth to keep from getting nauseated. Inside Kate's memory, a silver door with 456B stamped over it in black lettering slid into view. A hand flashed out, reaching for the handle. Kate's pale, slender fingers outstretched only to pull away as its molten hot touch. A hand lashed out against the wood, then a foot. The image wavered, curling at the edges of the door, disappeared behind the dark smoke that spewed through its cracks and joints. The same dark door shut, and I jolted back, pulling my arm out from under hers. What the hell? I thought, my heart racing in my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut. Still? Kate said. Oh, Ruby, I'm so sorry. When we switch cars, I'll be sure to ask for something that can help ease your stomach. She, like all the others, was oblivious. You know, Kate said after a while. She kept her eyes on the dark road to where it met the brightening sky. It was brave of you to have the pills and come with me. I knew there was more to you than the quiet girl I met in the infirmary. I'm not brave. If I had been, I would have owned up to what I really was. No matter how terrible, I would have worked, eaten, and slept alongside the other oranges, or at least stepped out of the shadows of the yellows and reds. Those kids had been so proud of their powers. They had made a point of harassing the camp controllers at every turn, hurting the PSFs, setting their cabins and washrooms on fire, trying to talk their way out of the gate, or driving the adults insane by putting images of murdered families or cheating wives in their heads. It was impossible to miss them, to not step aside and turn away when they passed. I had let myself sit like a coward in the dull, endless stream of gray and green, never drawing attention, never once letting myself believe that I could or should escape. I think that all they wanted us to find was a way out. and to do it themselves. They had burned so bright and fought so hard to get free, but none of them had made it to 16. There are thousands of ways to tell if someone is lying to you. You don't need to be able to glimpse into their mind to catch all of the little signs of insecurities and discomfort. More often than not, all you have to do is look at them. If they glance to the left while they're talking to you, if they add too many details to a story, if they answer a question with a question. My dad, a cop, taught me and 24 other kids about it in 2nd grade when he gave his presentation on stranger danger. But Kate had no tells. She told me something about the world that didn't seem possible, not until we were able to pick up a radio station and a solemn voice bled through the speakers to confirm it all. "Yes!" she cried, slapping the palm against the wheel. "Finally!" The president has reportedly refused an invitation from Britain's Prime Minister to discuss possible relief measures for the world economic crisis and how to pump life back into the saging global stock markets. When asked to explain his decision, the president cited the United Kingdom's role in the UN's economy sanctions against the United States. Kate fiddled with the tuning again. The newscaster's voice faded in and out. At the first burst of static, I jumped. 45 women were arrested in Austin, Texas yesterday for attempting to evade the birth registry. The women will be detained in a corrections facility until their children are born, after which the infants will be removed for the safety of their mothers and the state of Texas. The Attorney General had this to say. Another voice came through, this one deep and raspy. In accordance with New Order 15, President Gray issued an arrest warrant for all persons involved with this dangerous activity. Gray? I glanced at Kate. He's still the president? He had only been elected when the first cases of Ian appeared, and I couldn't really remember anything about him, other than that he had dark eyes and dark hair. And even that I only knew because the camp controllers had strung up pictures of his son, Clancy, all over the camp as proof to us that we too would be reformed and could be reformed. I had a sudden sharp memory of the last time I had been in the infirmary and the way his picture had seemed to watch me. She shook her head, visibly disgusted. He granted himself a term extension until the PSI situation is, and I quote, resolved so as to make sure the United States is safe from telekinetic acts of terror and violence. He even suspended Congress. How did he manage that? I asked. With his so-called wartime powers, Kate said. Maybe a year or two after you were taken, some PSI kids nearly succeeded in blowing up the Capitol. Nearly? What does that mean? Kate glanced over again, studying my face. It means that they only succeeded in blowing up the Senate portion of it. President Gray's control of the government was only supposed to last until new congressional elections could be held, but then the riots started when the PSF started pulling kids from schools without their parents' permission. And then, of course, the economy tanked. And the country defaulted on its debt. You'd be surprised how little voice you have when you lose everything. And everyone just let him? The thought turned my stomach. No one just let him. It's chaos out here right now, Ruby. Gray keeps trying to tighten his control, and every day more and more people are rioting or breaking whatever laws we have left just to get food on the table. My dad was killed in a riot. Kate turned around to face the back seat so quickly the car actually swerved into the other lane. I had known Martin was awake for at least 10 minutes. His breathing had become much lighter, and he had stopped doing his weird little lip licking and grunts. I just hadn't wanted to talk to him or to interrupt Kate. The people in our neighborhood robbed his store for food, and he couldn't even defend himself. How are you feeling? Sugar-coated Kate's words, almost as sweet as the vanilla air freshener twirling around in front of us. Okay, I guess. He sat up, trying to pat down his floppy brown hair into something presentable. Martin was round all over. His cheeks drooped, and his uniform shirt might have been a size too small. But he hadn't started growing like the other kids in his cabin. I had maybe an inch or two on him, and I was short, with an average build. He couldn't have been more than a year younger than I was. I'm glad. There's a water bottle back there for you if you need it. We'll be stopping in about an hour to switch cars again. Where are we going? We're meeting with a friend in Marlinton, West Virginia. He'll have a change of clothes and identification papers for both of you. We're almost there now. I thought for sure Martin had dropped right back off into sleep until he asked, "Where are we going after that?" The radio flashed to life, snatching up bits and pieces of Led Zeppelin before losing it again in static and silence. I could feel Martin's eyes burning holes into the back of my neck. I tried not to turn around to stare back right at him, but it was the closest I had been to a boy my age since we had been sorted. After years of living on opposite sides of the main trail in Thurman. I apologize for that little noise. Now, getting back to the story. After years of living on opposite sides of the main trail in Thurman, it was unnerving to suddenly be present with all his little details. The freckles I hadn't noticed on his face, for instance, or the way his eyebrows seemed to merge into one. What was I supposed to say to him? I'm so glad I found you. We're the last of us. One was the truth. and one couldn't be further from it. We're going to regroup with the League at their southern headquarters. After we get there, you can decide if you want to stay, she said. I know you've been through a lot, so you don't have to make any choices now. Just know that you'll be safe if you stay with me. The feeling of freedom rose in me so fast that I had to chase it down, to squash it along with my swelling heart. It was still too dangerous. There was a chance that the PSFs could catch up to us, that I'd be back in camp or dead before we even got to Virginia. Martin watched me, his dark eyes narrowed. I watched as his pupils seemed to shrink, and I felt a tickle in the back of my mind, the same one I always felt when my abilities wanted to be let out and used. What the hell? My fingers dug into the armrest, but I didn't turn back around to see if he was still at it. I glanced up into the rearview mirror only once, watching as he leaned back against the seat and crossed his arms over his chest with a huff. A sore at the corner of his mouth looked angry and red, like he had been scratching at the scab. I want to go where I can do what I couldn't do at Thurman, Martin said finally. I didn't want to know what he meant by that. I'm a lot more powerful than you think, he continued. You won't need anyone else after you see what I can do. Kate smiled. That's what I'm counting on. I knew you'd understand. What about you, Ruby? She turned to me. Are you willing to make a difference? If I said no, would they let me go? If I asked to go to my parents' house in Salem, would they take me there? No questions asked. To Virginia Beach if I wanted to see my grandmother? Out of the country if that's what I really wanted? They were both looking at me, wearing mirrored looks of urgency and excitement. I wish I could have felt it. I wish I could have shared in the security they were feeling about their choice, but I wasn't absolutely certain of what I wanted. I only knew what I didn't want. Take me anywhere, I said. Anywhere but home. Martin picked at the sore with his grubby nails until blood appeared, and he licked it off his lips and the tip of his fingers, watching me like he expected me to ask for a taste. I turned back to Kate, a question dying on my lips, because for a second, just one, all I could think about was the sight of the fire and smoke rising from the sharp lines on her shoulders and the door she couldn't open. And that is the end of chapter 6. Tune in next time for chapter 7. And again, I apologize for the interruptions and for the little mistakes I made. But as always, I hope that you have a beautiful morning, afternoon, or night, wherever you are. And Ruby out.